Hi, I'm Ayse Hogan, and this is a special episode of Talk That Talk on the Chakra House of Healing. I'm here again with Tariq Sattaur. Thanks, Tariq, for coming out.
Glad to be here again.
So today we're going to talk about mirroring.
Yes. So when we're talking about mirroring, I think we want to clarify for those people who are out there exactly what type of mirroring we're talking about.
And what is it?
So,
obviously what it is too.
Okay, so typically when you are interacting with someone, and if you have a very close relationship to that person, you may find that you have certain habits that you tend to mimic almost.
So you, like when I say, why do I attract the same kind of guy all the time into my life?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So what you're experiencing there is a pattern that has been replicated over and over and over in your unconscious mind. And essentially, when you're looking out there into the world, you know, at people or events or situations, the pattern that is in your unconscious mind is what's being mirrored or reflected in the world around you. And when you encounter something that is familiar to you, the unconscious mind recognizes the familiarity of it, even if the conscious mind doesn't, and so you become drawn to...
It's like a magnet, so we just keep doing the same pattern over and over again, whether it's good for us or not.
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of behaviors that we may engage in through a mirrored type of experience are often not good for us.
Right.
And we recognize this when we're doing something and we're thinking, why am I still doing this? Why don't I just stop? And you could be in the middle of doing it and you're still doing it and you're saying, I should stop, and you're still doing it. And it's just because, one, you have the pattern that's kind of just rolling out there, but two, you're kind of replicating the experience all the way through to the end of it. And to kind of interrupt it in the middle would feel, well, uncomfortable.
Right, because you don't know what... It's like you would have no option. If you don't choose this option, you're just not going to have any option.
It's not available to you.
Right.
Recently, I've come across some information. I've been doing some studies on what are known as mirror neurons that are found in our brain. And these are neurons that have been discovered fairly recently by some Italian scientists, by accident actually. And mirror neurons are known as precursor motor neurons. So what that means, what that means is they operate just before the motor neurons in your brain that allow you to lift your arm or move your head or whatever, you know, whatever action you're engaged in. So the precursor mirror neurons have been known initially to help us understand what a person is doing by observing their action.
Okay.
And this works because when, let's say I were to lift my right arm, I have a certain neural pathway in my brain that is activated. But if you were to lift your right arm, that exact same neural pathway that is activated when I lift my right arm is also activated in my brain. So I can recognize what it is you're doing. I understand what it is you're doing because I'm replicating it in my own brain.
Okay.
And so we thought, okay, well, you know, we have mirror neurons in our brain that helps us to understand things that we observe. But further research has shown that these mirror neurons can actually give us insight into the intention behind the action that a person engages in. So if I were to move my arm, so if I was going to do this and you saw my arm moving, well, you know I'm reaching for something, there's the glass there, and you will assume or automatically have an idea that I'm reaching for the glass.
The glass of wine.
Exactly.
That we're just going to keep on drinking.
And we're going to keep drinking it. And so, you know, and what we've discovered is it's kind of remarkable because while it's possible for us to point to the brain and say, okay, this is what's happening, this is the neural pathway that moves the arm, we cannot identify where in the brain the intention arises from.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, here's what I don't get, okay? So now, you and I did a segment together, like a session together about and it turned into a mirroring session.
Yes, it is.
And let's talk about that first. So, we did a session, you put me under, we went into trance. We dealt with an old boyfriend. We dealt with my issues with my father. And then we sort of realized that I was picking the same kind of men that had sort of that similar characteristics to my father. Not all, but similar characteristics. The ones that I didn't like about my dad. Like the ones that I wanted to change or I thought I could change about my father were the ones that I was actually mimicking. I wasn't picking his good stuff. I was picking all the bad stuff. And that was what I was finding in the men that I was choosing.
Well, look at what you said. You said you were picking the characteristics of your father that you had wished you could have changed. You never got to change them.
No.
So you're continuing that task of trying to fix those characteristics that you don't like. and you can only fix them if they're there in your life, and so you pick men who have these characteristics.
Right.
Now, if you see a guy walking down the street, do you say, oh, I like his characteristics? You don't, right? You can't tell, because he's just walking down the street.
Right.
Yet, your brain, your unconscious mind can recognize
certain things
and
get that energy.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And just by sitting and have a conversation, you can almost begin to recognize some of these character traits that a person has, even if they are not necessarily embodying those traits in that moment.
Right.
Because again, these neurons in your brains can recognize intention behind certain actions. So say, for instance, there were certain things that one would do subtly. And when we're communicating, we move our faces, right? We don't think of lifting the eyebrows. It just happens. It's part of communication.
And where does that come from? Like, that always freaks me out. So when you sit there and I'm talking to people like my clients, and I'll be like, you know, this is the brain and this is what it does, but it's not where the thoughts actually originate.
Right.
You know, so where the thoughts actually originate.
Where are the thoughts coming from?
Right. So I like to say it's soul, right? So where are the thoughts actually coming from?
We can say it's soul. For our purposes at this point in time, we can absolutely say it's soul. There is a philosopher, his name is John Campbell. Now, philosophy and neurology typically don't mix, because neurology is hard science. We can point to it, we can measure it.
Right.
Philosophy is, you know, it's just abstract thinking and kind of theorizing about certain things. But what he has done is he's kind of merged the two, where he's looking at where are thoughts coming from. And the best way to study psychology is to study abnormal psychology. So we look at people who don't possess the qualities that we normally have in everyday situations, and we kind of observe what's different about these people that's preventing them. So they looked at schizophrenics. And what happens is, in you and I, if we were to do something, lift our arm, think a thought, what happens is the brain creates it's kind of like a copy of the impulse to do that action. So if I made a decision to pick up my glass, then the decision, the copy of that decision, is sent to a part of the brain. Let's call it the central processing part of the brain. And when I pick up the glass, the brain then self-references that part and says, oh, yeah, you made the decision to pick the glass up. But a schizophrenic, if they picked the glass up, they may feel as if, well, you know, someone else is making them do that. If I were schizophrenic and I pick up the glass, I may have, not that I will, but I may have the inclination to believe that you inserted the thought or the impulse to pick up the glass, because... You
know, I have a real interesting theory that just kind of jumped into my mind right now while you were saying this. But first thing, before I tell you about that, we do need to go to a Zen break.
Okay.
And as soon as we come back from that, I'm going to throw that out to you. It's kind of an interesting... I think you're going to like it.
I'm pretty sure I will.
Okay, all right. Let's go to a Zen break.
I'm Kelly from Solely You Holistic Wellness, and I facilitate a revolutionary dance program called Groove, where everyone is united in the same movement or rhythm, but not following the leader, and encouraged to move their own way, bringing back the mind-body connection, which is the most important part of health, fitness, and wellness. For more information, please see www.solelyu.com.
Welcome back from the Zen break. So here's my question to you.
All right.
Schizophrenics.
Okay.
Now we know that the thoughts are not coming from the brain.
Right.
They're coming from somewhere else. What if schizophrenia, they actually know the difference, and that's why they think, like, they know that the soul is telling the mind something. So like, in a sense that maybe they're actually more in tune than you and I are.
You know, I would tend to agree with you that we do not know enough about what people who suffer from challenges like schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder. I think we have come up with ways to explain things that make sense according to the model of the world we're trying to construct.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I believe that model discounts anything that we can't point to physically and say this is it. Because
but there's so much in what we do.
Absolutely.
That we can't point to.
Absolutely.
But it works.
And so that's what John Campbell was pointing out in his discussion on schizophrenics, because, you know, if they were to pick up the glass and think, okay, well, you know, Ayse, you made me pick the glass up, because their brain doesn't have the capacity to self-reference, so they know they made the decision. What happens is the same thing with their thoughts. That's why people who have these ideas of thought insertion, that you are projecting your thoughts into my head, it's because the brain doesn't have that copy of the message that says, you know, you had the impulse to think that thought.
So they know that the thought is coming from somewhere else.
Well, that's just it. Where does the impulse to think the thought come from? We know that the thought originates in the brain. We can point. But where does the decision to think that thought come from? That comes from something that would be beyond what we call the brain, and we have no way to point to it. We have nothing.
So the schizophrenic doesn't have that link that we have from where the decision was made to where we actually implement that thought.
So they can't say that I am the one who is responsible for this thought or this action. But you see, we're fortunate to have this kind of experience because now we can see we have no idea where our impulses to think the thought comes from. We may know where the impulse to do an action comes from, but then where does the thought to do the action come from? We have no clue. Yet mirror neurons can give us an idea about the intention behind an act. How on earth is that possible? Like, where does the intention reside? It's not in the brain. So you are looking at a person, in this case, a guy walking down the street.
But if you think of Wayne Dyer, for instance, he talks about intention almost like as another field of energy.
Absolutely. And I believe that intention could be something that is beyond, let's call it the brain. It resides in the mind. And we know that the mind is not the brain. So we know that the mind doesn't exist just here. And I would say, you know, we could use, let's say the mind is specific to the body, but it is at the same time connected to the soul, which is beyond the body. And most of us have this idea that, you know, the soul is contained within our body. But if that's the case, then maybe we need to think of it as the body is contained within the soul.
You know what the one interesting thing was, I have to bring up, that when we were doing, for those of us, you know, for those of you who don't know, Tariq was actually my teacher in getting my hypnosis and metaphysical certification. So when we were doing that course, the one thing that was really interesting to me was because I was the same thing. I thought, you know, like, here's the bubble of the soul attached to the soul star and the earth star, and here's the body that I've rented this time, and next time I'm going to rent a way better body. But so rented this body this time to like live this life through. And so doing this course, now I kind of see the soul as this really massive thing because time only exists here and not anywhere else. So now I see the soul like almost having tentacles. So now it's in this life, the past life, the present life, the future life, in this dimension, all other dimensions, all at the same time. So it's massive.
It is. What you're doing there in kind of creating this image in your head, you're doing what all human beings doing. We're taking a concept that's beyond our ability to comprehend and we're reducing it to ideas and images that we can actually relate to.
Because I'm very visual, right? So I need to see it to understand it. But
realize that what we're doing, all of us as human beings, when we do these types of you know, processes to help us is we're limiting. We're taking something that is so vast, so big, beyond our ability to comprehend, and we're reducing it to something that we can understand, at least at this point in time. As our consciousness evolves and as we gain more knowledge and awareness, we may then see that exact same situation in a different light, as you have observed in your own life. When you came to a point of understanding where, you know, you were able to relate to the events and circumstances in your life from a different perspective, you changed. So you evolved from where you were into where you want to be and where you want to go. And that's something that happens quite naturally. But realize you were already the thing that you became. So you were already contained all of that stuff. You just move from this part into the next part. And so this is kind of the idea, you know, what's happening with the mirroring. It's that you have this huge energy that is all you out there, and it interacts with the energy of other people. And as your energies intersect as you're passing by, I'm not saying I don't know for sure, but perhaps that's what's triggering those neurons in your brain.
Because it's actually recognizing. It's recognizing that energy like an old friend, which actually should be a frenemy.
It probably
is. So it like recognizes that frenemy, and because it's something that I'm familiar with, I automatically attach myself to that energy, or I feel attracted to that energy.
But let's take it a bit further. I mean, we know that we're coming into these lives, and I don't want to say to learn. I mean, maybe it's to remember or to reconnect with all that we are. Using that point of view, you are attracted to, or you attract to yourself, those individuals who give you the quote-unquote lesson that you need in your life at that time.
Right.
And so your energy has this vibration that then recognizes the similar pattern of vibration in K walking down the street. And as you synchronize, then somehow you're drawn to each other, you connect. Now, this is not a happy vibration, because you know the experiences you've had thus far have not been great.
Happy. No.
Yet they have brought you great wisdom.
This is true. I've learned a lot from it. And it's so funny, because that's one of the things that I say now, is that I wouldn't change one thing that I've gone through in my life, because if I did, I may not be sitting here talking to you today. So
absolutely.
So all of that anguish and pain and garbage and whatever that I went through was all worth it in the end, because it's brought me to the point where now I do what I do with a passion, and I'm on the path that I am on, and I love it. So
and it's authentic for you.
Yes.
Because you've lived it, you understand it, and when you're speaking with your clients, you're not pretending, and you don't have to pretend, because you have lived the experience. You can relate to them. Now, you can't necessarily say that, you know, you understand exactly, because it's different, it's them. But at the same time, you have gone through that, and it's that vibration that you now have within yourself that has brought this client to you.
And I notice that's happening a lot lately. Like, it's happening a lot lately. Like, the clients that I deal with, a lot of them are, now when I say it like this, I don't want people to take it the wrong way, but they always say, like, you always tend to help people who are sort of one step or two steps behind you.
Yes.
Right? So because their energy, because I can totally relate to what they're going through. Now, not to say that I'm not helping other clients as well, but the ones that I'm making the real, like, serious strides with quickly are the ones that are the one or two steps behind me, because I get them completely. I know exactly where they're coming from. When they start the sentence, I already know how it ends. Like, so it's...
And I'm sure you found that not only are you helping those people, but in some way you're also keeping yourself moving ever forward, because you are then evolving to the next phase as they come into the phase where you are at now, and so that process continues to unfold. And so in a sense, you are experiencing and creating your own healing as you are helping to heal others. So that's why I like doing this work.
Yeah, so amazing.
Yeah, and it can come quite naturally to you, because it's already all up there coded in your neurons in your brain, and you recognize this in other people because of this mirroring effect that seems to happen.
We're gonna have to wrap this up. I mean, you know me. You and me can go on forever and a day. So we'll have to bring this up again on another episode for sure, because it is like, it's really, I think it's something that people really need to hear about, and people need to really understand more, because I think that lots of people are going through this. I think lots of people are mirroring things in their lives, and maybe this is going to give them those aha moments that they need to go, wait a minute, maybe I do need to, like, figure out what my next steps are here, and maybe I do need to, like, make a phone call or talk to someone else that can help me through this.
Absolutely.
But thanks again.
My pleasure.
For coming out, and wow.
Lots to
you
think
get
about.
Me thinking. So every time we leave, my mind spins. So great. Thank you again, Tariq, for everything. And yeah. I want to thank you for coming out to this episode of Talk That Talk at the Chakra House of Healing. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like the episodes. Please send in your comments and questions. Don't forget that we are now on the Big Book of Beauty network, and it's a wonderful new network that the show is now on. So please make sure that you view us there. And yeah. Just send me your comments and questions. Get me on Facebook. Talk to me. Comment to me. I want to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Bye.